Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a world where the air smells like spoiled meat. The streets are eerily silent, and the only sound that breaks the stillness is the slow creak of wooden wheels over cobblestone. You're in a plague-ridden European city, sometime in the mid-1300s. The sun hasn't even cleared the rooftops, and already the stench of decay clings to everything: your clothes, your skin, even your thoughts. You're a body collector now. You didn't plan to be, obviously. But when the coin runs dry and no one's buying wool or wine or whatever it was you used to sell suddenly, shoveling the dead onto carts for a few coppers doesn't sound so bad. This is sourness layered with a strange sweetness that turns your stomach, mixed with the unmistakable scent of human waste and something metallic. That's the blood, you think. Or maybe it's just the iron nails in the doors people are hammering shut behind their dying loved ones. No merchants shouting. All you see are bodies. Every corner of the city whispers death now. Maybe you had dreams once, something involving songs, or horses, or warm bread, but that was before the sickness came, before the guilds closed their doors, before you watched your sister's skin bloom with black bruised roses, and before your mother told you not to come any closer as she bled into the mattress. Her head made a hollow sound when it hit, like a gourd split open. You cried afterward, not in front of anyone, of course. Just once, you were back in the alley, under the butcher's awning where you slept that night. You haven't cried since. Even the breeze feels contaminated, and you instinctively turn your face when the wind picks up. Just the occasional cough echoing off stone walls. The pigeons have stayed, but the cats have mostly disappeared. A dog watches you from behind a broken barrel. It's missing an ear and has the look of something that used to belong to someone once. It doesn't bark. Nothing barks anymore. Just you, the cart, and the dead. A window breaking, followed by laughter, unhinged, desperate laughter. You don't stop to investigate. You've learned it's never good. A few of them wear masks, those bizarre, bird-like beaks stuffed with herbs. The theory is that sweet-smelling things will purify the air, maybe keep the sickness out. But you know of at least 3 collectors who wore those masks and still died screaming. Still, the look is popular, very medieval Halloween chic. Either someone's looting, or someone's losing their mind, or both. You wash them in vinegar, wrap them in cloth, keep them from touching your face. She doesn't look sick, but who can tell anymore? You think about calling out, but your voice catches. She's gone around the corner before you can even decide if she was real. But it's never enough. No matter what you do, they always feel dirty, not just physically. You wonder how many people you've carried now. 100 more. You stopped counting. Except those rags aren't rags. You know better now. It's a man, or what used to be one, curled on his side, eyes wide open, jaw slack. Probably not. You take another breath, already regretting it. He's stiff, but not bloated. Must have died last night. That's a blessing, in a way. You've seen what 3 days in the July sun can do to a body. You catch the end of it. Et lux perpetua lucet eyes. May eternal light shine upon them. Let's just say you never eat pork anymore. You nudge him with your boot to check for movement. None. His chest is still. Wonder where they've gone. Actually, no scratch. That you're afraid you already know. You mutter something soothing to it. Yes, the cart has a name. Gertrude. Don't laugh. When you're hauling dozens of bodies a day, you need someone to talk to, even if she's made of splintering oak. and one wheel always pulls to the left until you actually do it. The ones who are alive usually let you know very loudly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. Always curious where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots squelch into the half-mud, half-waste that coats the alleyway behind St. Olaf's. The bell hasn't rung yet. That's the cue that someone's died, and their family needs them gone fast. But you already know what's coming. You smell it. It's not just rot. That would be almost polite. You cover your mouth with a damp cloth, hoping the vinegar solution helps. It doesn't. Nothing does. Every breath is a punishment. The city, maybe London, maybe Florence, maybe Hamburg, has turned quiet. That's how you know things are worse now than before. No children playing. Historians still argue whether the rats or the fleas were more responsible for the spread. But when you're down here on the street, it doesn't matter. You used to be a baker's apprentice or a mason's son. Now you work with a cart. You remember your first day, how your hands trembled so badly you dropped a child she couldn't have been more than 6 right onto the stones. Funny what becomes normal, like breakfast beside a corpse, or tuning out the screams from behind boarded-up doors. There's already a pile of rags at the mouth of the alley. You don't bother checking for a pulse anymore. You grip the ankles thankfully still booted and haul him toward the cart. You heave him into the cart. The wheel screeches in protest. As you begin pushing her toward the main square, you glance down a side street. You think of your hands. A child runs past a blur of tattered rags and frantic eyes. As you pass the old apothecary, you hear a crash. You reach the square, where other collectors are already gathering. Most keep to themselves. No one shakes hands. You exchange nods. Sometimes, a priest mutters a prayer as a pile of bodies is unceremoniously dumped into a pit. You look up at the sky, wondering if anything can shine through the gray haze that now coats the city like dust. Time to get back to work. You're not supposed to be here. Not in this city. Not in this job. Not in this body collector's tunic that smells like vinegar, smoke, and something even worse that no one has found a word for yet. But here you are. And no one asks how you got here because everyone assumes the same thing. Desperation. Your real name doesn't matter much anymore. Too many applicants. It was the only job in the city still growing. You waited 3 days just to get a trial run. Some poor fool had collapsed in the bakery yard Hafrotten already, and the birds had started. You had to pull him off the cobblestones and show you could handle the load, as the supervisor said. No pay for the first one. Just a test. People call you ragman, or cart puller, or your personal favorite filth. Even the living whisper it like an insult. He's a head shorter than you, always smells like smoked fish, and whistles the same tune over and over. You hate that tune. You'd give anything to hear it again tomorrow. Just nods, shrugs, and the occasional muttered curse when a body leaks through the sack. Still, it's something. A tether. He's already pulling a load up from the slums near the tannery, where the plague hit hardest last week. He's got new gloves. You're almost jealous. You didn't have much, but there were days you'd sit by the river and dream of apprenticing with the glassmaker. He had a shop with little blue vials that caught the light like frozen fire. You once saw him make a goblet shaped like a tulip, and it made your chest ache, the beauty of it. You wanted to do that, create something delicate and alive, and your mother, well, she was the first one you had to load onto the cart. You didn't cry then. You just stared down at the patch of blood on her sleeve that hadn't dried right, that the Pope is living in a castle ringed with fire. Then the priest turned you a weight to full. So you lied. You said you'd handled it, pocketed the coin, and dumped her with the rest. You don't know what's true anymore. Your world has shrunk to a few dozen alleys, a cart, and a constant ache in your lower back. Behind silence, you see fewer faces in the windows each day. Then she fell forward, collapsed onto the sill, and didn't move. You didn't go inside, and wondered why her mouth was still open, like she had something more to say. No one tells you what to do when the world stops making sense, so you keep pulling the cart, as if you've chosen this life, like someone chooses to be a candlemaker or a brewer. You'd laugh if you had the energy. Now that the graveyards are full, he helps push Gertrude when her wheel jams. One time, a rat came tumbling out of a woman's skirts. It looked you dead in the eye and didn't even run, just sat there, twitching, like it knew you had nowhere to run either. He also knows which streets to avoid, where the dogs have gone feral. Before this, you were a cooper's son. Maybe you still are. But your father's barrels stopped selling when the taverns closed. You know how to judge the age of a corpse by the color of its tongue. You know that children are always lighter than you expect, and that sometimes you still whisper, "I'm sorry," as you lift them. The body collectors weren't even hiring when you first showed up. You passed. Talking costs breath, and breath is risky. Historians still argue whether this kind of work was mostly done by criminals, the very poor, or sometimes even monks under certain vows. But in truth, it was whoever was left, whoever didn't die or run, whoever needed bread. The church says you're doing God's work. The townspeople say you're a ghoul. You say nothing. You do have one friend in this, though. His name's Jacob. Jacob joined a few weeks before you. He used to be a gravedigger. You and Jacob don't talk much. This morning, you watch him from across the square. But you're not supposed to be here. The thought keeps coming back. You remember what it was like before the plague. Now you break bodies, not glass. The worst part, you're getting good at it. There's a trick to lifting the heavier one's grab under the arms, not the shoulders. Dead weight behaves differently. You know the sound a spine makes when it snaps under its own collapsed weight. Jacob says that makes you weak, but he still crosses himself when he passes the convent wall. So who's the soft one, really? There are rumors, of course, that the city officials are planning to burn everything and start over, that the nobles have fled to the countryside. Once a merchant offered you silver to take his wife's body to the churchyard instead of the pit. You agreed. You still remember her necklace, green stones. They looked fake. You feel guilt sometimes. But guilt is like vinegar water, it stings, then dries, and then you stop noticing. The children call you Death's Mule. At least the ones still outside do. Most hide now behind shutters. One time, a woman leaned out of her upper window and spat at you. "Vulture," she hissed. "You're not supposed to be here." But neither is any of this. This isn't how life is supposed to go. You try not to think about the fact that no one's told you where to stop.
The cart groans again. You glance at the wheel the back left, the same one that always leans like it's had too much ale and sigh. Gertrude is getting worse. The axle moans like a dying ox, and every time you hit a cobblestone the wrong way, you expect her to collapse entirely, spilling your grim cargo onto the street. You thought about fixing her once? Even pulled some scraps of wood from a burnt-out bakery to brace the wheel. But every time you patch one thing, something else gives out. Just like everything else in this city. And let's be honest, you barely have enough energy to fix yourself. Gertrude has been with you from the start. Some even believe the carts absorb the weight of the deaths they carry, and that's why some break down so quickly. Not from wear, but from sorrow. They gave her to you on your first day. A lopsided thing with one good wheel, one bad, and handles wrapped in old leather straps. You remember how heavy she felt the first time? Not just physically, emotionally. Like it's afraid to disturb the silence. Easy there, you mutter as you round a tight corner. The open window with a blanket nailed over it. They tried to stop the draft. The broken basin in the corner. Someone dropped it mid-fever. The wax splatters by the hearth.
Maybe.
They burned incense or herbs.
Oh.
Or maybe they just prayed and spilled the candle. Don't fall apart just yet.
Oh.
Sometimes it almost feels like she listens. Philosophically, even if that's a thing you can say without sounding too clever in a time like this, hands folded neatly over her chest, though her mouth is open. People always look surprised at the end. You wonder if it's pain or just the body's final trick, like you've betrayed some essential part of being human. But you keep going. Her eyes are clouded, skin mottled, especially around the neck. A neighbor tries to help, but you wave him off. It's better not to get close. He hesitates, his eyes on the sheet in your hands, then nods and backs away. In this job, you never assume it's just one. Sometimes the whole family goes at once. You've seen entire households, father, mother, 2 children, laid out side by side like a grim supper table. A small cluster of neighbors, 3 adults. 1 boy stand huddled together. One holds a bell. Another keeps looking away, not meeting your eyes. A linen cloth hangs from the frame, white once, now streaked with a rust-colored stain. That's the sign, the mark of death inside. You pull your scarf tighter around your nose and step in. Thought Gertrude given up, he says, gesturing with his chin. Thank whatever small gods are still listening. You want to say more, but you don't? No one wastes words anymore. The sign swings in the wind. It's painted low, faded. The windows are broken. There are flies on the old dough still sitting inside. She's part of you. Her father reported her death this morning, then disappeared. You talk to her more than you talk to people. There's a superstition among collectors that your cart has a soul, that if you name it, it'll carry your burden more willingly. Now, it's just rot and the faintest whiff of burnt flour. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were widespread or just isolated folklore, but out here, you don't question it, but you don't stop him. The sound climbs the alley walls, clings to the roof tiles, and fades. Touched her, cared. That little act of tenderness, in a house thick with death, represses something sharp behind your ribs. When death becomes your breakfast companion, you start believing in anything that helps you sleep at night. You arrive at a courtyard where the smell tells you what you're here for, before anyone even says a word. They don't speak, it's just point. It's a 2-story house, shutters closed, front door cracked. The air inside is heavy, it doesn't move. You've learned to read the rooms now. You see her. Middle-aged? You do a quick check. No movement, no breath. You've gotten fast at this part. There's something deeply wrong about becoming efficient at death. You roll her gently onto a sheet, tie the corners, and prepare to lift, and then you hear it, that sound again. The wheel. Gertrude, she's shifted. You hurry back outside. The wheel is jammed again, half off the stone curb. You shift Gertrude's load. 3 from earlier. 1 more now. The wheel creaks but doesn't collapse. Jacob once told you that carts collapse when the soul inside gives up. He said it like a joke. But he also touched wood 3 times after. You head back inside for another check. But here, it's just the woman. Someone's cleaned her feet. You don't know why that detail gets to you. Maybe it's because it means someone sat with her. You add her to the cart. The wheel protests but holds. Back in the square, Jacob spots you. Not yet. You grunt. You both roll through a narrow lane toward the next house. There's a girl there, they said. 13. You pass a bakery. You think about what that street used to smell like. Warm, yeasty air. Jacob starts humming again, that awful tune. Somewhere behind you, someone wails. A man, maybe, or a woman. Or someone caught halfway between. You don't stop. The cart keeps moving.
The bell tolls. A single, low clang from a cracked iron bell. Not from a church tower. Those have mostly gone silent, but from a stick-thin boy standing in the road. Payment comes in scraps of bread or the occasional coin. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. It's a sour, sweet reek that clings to everything. It has layers. Crude, yes, but it works. If you hear the bell and ignore it, someone else might not come for days. The air is thick. You lift your scarf. Doesn't help. The cobblestones here are worse-than-even, damp, always slick with something you try not to think about. The buildings lean over you like guilty eavesdroppers. The sky is gray again, or maybe still. That means either they're all dead, or one is alive and trying very hard not to be noticed. Her eyes look straight into yours, and then past you, like she's not sure you're real. You can't remember the last time you saw blue, and by then, well, let's just say even the rats turn their noses up, and an old man on a chair, still upright, eyes open and clouded. Flies buzz in lazy spirals. Gertrude creaks beside you as you turn toward the source, just gone, the way most go now. As you near the house, the smell hits you before you even see the door. You shouldn't help her. You know that. She might be carrying it, not just for what it is, but for what it means. The door is ajar. That S, often a sign. Either they via goner, they want nothing to do with what S inside. Fewer rats, still water in the well. You step in. He doesn't ask. The boy is light. The woman has lost so much weight you can feel her bones through the cloth. 1 rock per soul. So far, 12. Today. It's not even midday. The old man. A scrape. The wheel screeches louder now, but still rolls. Your head turns fast. A shape moves behind a curtain. Her skin is pale, flushed at the cheeks. Entire neighborhoods vanish, and no one even talks about it anymore. Just another block added to the silence. She isn't coughing. You're living it, and you still don't know. You're not dead. She blinks slowly. Not yet. You glance back at the room. Her family, maybe. No signs of violence. Maybe someone panicked. You try not to wonder. You need to leave, you say. There'll be more collectors later. They won't check. She doesn't answer. You stand. Go west, you mutter. Near the orchard wall. She nods. Back outside, Jacob is adjusting the load in his cart. He sees your face and raises an eyebrow. You just shake your head. Flooded, then looted, then burned. That order, apparently. You both fall silent. It's hard to keep track now. Historians still debate whether these systems bell-ringing tally boards, silent agreements, were organized responses or just chaos taking shape. You find another body slumped beside a trough. This one has no face. Not eaten, just crushed. Maybe a cartwheel. At the end of the street, another bell rings. Your shift isn't over yet. You push on, Gertrude rattling beside you. You think you've seen it all? That's the lie you tell yourself each morning, just to get your boots on. After dozens of houses, hundreds of bodies, and 1,000 unnameable smells, it's easy to pretend you've become immune, that nothing can shock you anymore. Picked up a whole family 2 weeks back. Now the neighbors are gone too, one by one, like teeth falling out of a jaw. You don't even knock anymore. If someone's alive, they'll scream. If they don't, well, you go in. But today proves you wrong. It starts at a house near the tannery wall where the air already smells like leather, smoke, and ammonia. You've come here before. He's dressed in what might have been a merchant's coat, though it's soaked through and stiff. You roll him carefully. His eyes are quite, tongue black, nothing new. This one is quiet. You enter with Gertrude parked out front, her broken wheel angled like a lazy wink. Instinct, pure and simple. You've seen many things, but never this. Inside, one body. A man on the floor, limbs contorted like a dropped puppet. But then you notice his skin. Boils, of course. You expect that. You don't want to give that idea oxygen. Buboes in the armpits, groin, neck. But these look different. It unraveled. One more pickup, then maybe a break. Maybe some broth, if there's any left in the communal pot back near the north gate. You laughed at the time. Now you're not so sure. Say nothing else. He helps you wrap the body. Sometimes it's a trap someone desperate enough to rob a corpse collector. But most of the time, it's true. Carefully. He looks up at you not with fear, but envy. A chorus. Up the next street, behind a row of shuttered homes. We'll see him again soon, one way or the other. A wet, hacking sound that claws at your ears. You glance at Jacoby. He tightens his scarf and keeps walking. You do the same. There's nothing you can do for them. Not yet. Very old, thin as parchment. She's wrapped in blankets and seems to be sleeping. She's a survivor, just like you. Someone tried. Presses it into your hand. That alone is rare now. Comfortable in a twisted way. Like the city is knitting its own family of corpses, and you're one of the midwives. Not yet, but you know you'll be back. No direct contact. Cloth between every fold. Gertrude waits outside, loaded and patient. You double the wax on your gloves. The wind picks up. You think you hear the bell again. Triple it, even. The skin pulsates, like something underneath is still trying to get out. You feel bile rise in your throat. They're greenish, huge, and one is moving. You recoil. You steady your breath. Lean closer. Jacob's voice startles you from the doorway. You, all right? You nod, but too quickly. He steps in, glances at the body, then curses under his breath. God's teeth. You look at each other. Historians still argue whether these bizarre symptoms were signs of a secondary infection, or if some other illness, anthrax, perhaps had piggybacked on the plague in certain regions. Whatever the cause, you know this body is different, and not in a good way. You say a prayer. Jacob mutters 1-2, though his voice shakes. You both back away fast. You dump the merchant gently into the cart, and then he says it. He looked like he was still listening. You don't reply. Back in the alley, you try to shake the feeling. Keep moving, but your stomach won't settle. That body, it didn't just die. You remember what a friar once told you as he sprinkled lavender over a corpse. The devil loves a warm body more than a cold one. You push Gertrude up a hill, every muscle in your back screaming. Her wheel wobbles, catches, then rolls again. Then you hear it, coughing. Not just one. Sometimes people hang signs from their windows, all dead inside. Or one left, please help. You pass a young man sitting on a stoop. He's pale, sweating, breathing through his mouth. They still paying? He asks, voice raspy. You nod. He doesn't say anything else, just stands up, stumbles toward the collector's office down by the square. One more soul joining the ranks. Jacob sighs. The strange thing is, you don't dread it. The thought of seeing him again, even dead, feels familiar. You arrive at the last house on your list, a small cottage with a painted door blue, chipped inside. A woman. You step closer. Her chest rises barely, still alive. Her eyes flutter open, pale, cloudy. You hear from me, she whispers. You nod, uncertain. She nods back. I thought so. She reaches for something, an amulet on a string. No children, she says. No one left. Then she closes her eyes again. You leave without taking her. You look down at the amulet. Just a smooth stone, carved with a shape you don't recognize. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. You slip it into your pocket. The sun is starting to set, and the sky turns a sickly orange. But it could just be in your head. You wake to a gray dawn, the kind that makes it hard to tell whether it's morning or just a lighter version of night. The air outside is thick with wood smoke, the fog of 1,000 chimneys coughing into the sky. A bell is tolling near the convent, another death, or several. Sometimes a tattered rag hangs from a handle, a signal, come for the body. The scent clings to your skin and hair, but you've grown used to it, as you have to the stink of everything else. Today, your task begins before the sun even breaks fully through the clouds. You nod, gently gather the bodies into your cart, and move on. You trudge past rows of shuttered shops and silent homes, their doors marked with black crosses or red-painted warnings. Load, wrap, cover. The weight registers less and less in your arms. You stop wondering how old each one was, or whether they were loved. At the convent, a nun meets you at the gate. Her eyes are sunken, her veil threadbare. She doesn't speak, just points. You follow her to the courtyard, where 2 small bundles wrapped in linen lie side by side. Children. There are no visible signs of struggle, just stillness. The sister makes the sign of the cross. You do not. You've stopped asking why. You never speak. Just nod silent acknowledgement in a war where every man fights his own route. She insists on saying their names aloud, Magdalena and Joan. She wants them to be remembered. Or if that's just folklore, exaggerated over time. But when you walk these streets, the numbers feel almost irrelevant. A desperate cure, he claims. He smells like a walking sachet. You pause at a well to rinse your hands, though the water is brown and probably more curse than cure. Your skin is permanently gray, the ridges of your fingers swollen, raw. But it's not the hands you worry about, it's the dreams, or lack of them. You don't have the heart to tell him the fleas don't care. You see it in the stillness, the absence that speaks louder. That's what you're trudging through. A city slowly hollowing out like old bread. He wails like an animal, but eventually gives way. You remember her face for days. A tiny horse, a castle, his name, Hugo. The pile of limbs and linen grows. You try not to look long. You'll do this again and again today. They've either left, died, or turned to stone. A little ceremony. You watch from a distance, suddenly unsure if you're interrupting something sacred or just part of it. You can tell if she's crying or if the wind is just stinging her eyes. You set your bundle down gently and step back. What surprises you is how it doesn't get easier, but it does get faster. Your hands work like a butcher's, practiced and impersonal. Still, there are moments that crack through, like the woman near the river whose husband clutches her body so tightly you have to pry him off. Or the boy outside the granary, stiff and alone, with chalk drawings still etched beside him on the street. The oddest part is how the quiet makes it worse. Most houses are sealed shut. No one weeps openly anymore. Sometimes you catch sight of another collector across town. A mainstream fact. London's 1349 mortality rate reached nearly 50%, and the city emptied in parts so completely that entire parishes were left with no living residents. Historians still argue whether London's death toll truly hit the often quoted half of the population. As for fringe detail, you once pass a man in a mask made entirely of dried lavender sewn onto linen. By midday, the cart creaks under the weight of your cargo. You used to have nightmares. Now you barely sleep. As you unload at the common pit outside Bishopsgate, you notice something rare. A group of townsfolk gathered, heads bowed, tossing in flowers. The hole is deeper than yesterday. One woman tosses in a locket. Another, a scrap of cloth embroidered with initials. Then, because this is your life, now you walk away, hands empty, cart lighter, until the next bell. You pull your cowl tighter over your face as you reach the gates of the abbey, where the monks have been dying off faster than they can finish their prayers. The morning light filters weakly through the mist, casting a holy aura over the crumbling stonework. The air here is thick with beeswax, mildew, and decaying, not just from the bodies, but from the damp stone cloisters and drafty chapels that once rang with Gregorian chants. Today, there's silence, monastic silence, yes, but also the silence of absence, of death. You step over a discarded robe, still shaped vaguely like the monk who last wore it. No one's come to collect the bodies inside. That's why you're here. The novice helps, his lips moving soundlessly in prayer or shock or both. Just that. Burn the books. Then his hand falls away. You glance around. Are there forbidden texts here, heretical ones? Or is this just the rambling of a fevered mind? The rest of the abbey is silent. Maybe you imagined that bell ringing earlier. Maybe even God has gone quiet. The novice says a Latin verse when each load passes. You pretend not to notice that he's crying now, openly. The other monks are gone. He is alone. As you trundle down the muddy road, you pass the abbey's stone gate again and notice something you missed earlier. A wooden carving nailed to the wall. It reads, "Ora pro nobis, pray for us." He doesn't speak, just points toward the infirmary, which is a generous term for what's become a room of the dead. "Bad batch in there," one of them mutters, pulling his mask tighter. You nod. Understatement of the week. A few days ago, monks still shuffled about, murmuring psalms and doling out herbal poultices. Now, it's a lined-up row of brown habits, shaved heads, slack against stone, rosaries clenched in lifeless fingers. Later, you'll hear rumors that this abbey had a bishop visiting when the plague hit, and he insisted on dying in full regalia, as if St. Peter kept a guest list. You wonder if that worked out for him. The smell is overpowering, worse than the tenement basements, because this is enclosed space, sacred space, and worse still, it smells like faith rotting. In the kitchens, 2 cooks are collapsed over cauldrons of stew that's long gone rancid. In the garden, you step over a body in a prayer pose maybe. He thought the earth itself would save him. A young novice with red-rimmed eyes meets you near the chapter house. But a glance here, a twitch of curiosity there, and you see details you can't unsee. Just lay there, folded in robes, like they're already entombed. One corpse feels oddly light, and when you lift the cowl, you realize it's not a man, but a boy. Maybe 13, maybe younger. He probably took vows just before the plague rolled through, hoping to escape the sins of the world, only to be ambushed by a darker fate inside holy walls. Another has a small pouch of dried rose petals under his pillow. Historians still argue whether monks faced death more calmly than the laity. But here, all you see is terror etched into faces and fingernails clawed into wood. You try not to look too closely as you begin your work. Removing the bodies here is different. The townsfolk spit or cry or offer coins. The monks, you carry them out one by one. On your third trip back in, you find a monk still breathing. You'll never know, because by the time you return, he's gone cold. Quirkily enough, one of the monks you carry out wears a perfectly preserved mitre bejeweled, embroidered, and entirely out of place among the others. The piles of dead don't end once you clear the infirmary. You don't speak much today. Outside, the other collectors help you with the cart. You leave the abbey behind in the same quiet it greeted you with. You say nothing, but you think it. The midday sun sits smug above London, as if mocking the sickly haze that clings to every brick, every thatch, every poor sod still breathing. You trudge across the muckslick alley behind St. Sepulchre's, gagging slightly on the sour stench of last week's refuser. Maybe that's just you. Reports say the man was a bell ringer till last night, at least. You duck under a crooked sign, your cart's wheels creaking behind you, and spot him, crumpled at the base of the bell tower's outer wall. He died mid-prayer, they say, hands still clasped when he hit the stones. There's something eerie about that. You pause, not from reverence. Reverence dried up with your last clean shirt butt from practicality. His hands are clenched tight around a rosary that's now stuck to his blackened fingers. The wooden barricade around it groans in the wind, threatening to give way. A clerk from the city council stands nearby, trying to tally the incoming dead. His limbs thud against others' arms, bent the wrong way, faces frozen mid-scream. You wince, but not out of guilt. It's your back again. The signs of life were hard to interpret. Twitching, gas escape, panic-induced spasms. Historians still argue whether many of the resurrections were urban myths or ghastly truths. But you remember the way one woman gasped just before the earth fell over her face, like fruit left out too long on a summer day, laced with iron. You look down and see them surfacing like ships, crawling over limbs, like they know no shame. One makes eye contact with you, it blinks. A clerk faints. You, impressively, do not. You've trained yourself to breathe through your mouth, though that has its own horrors. You haven't had a proper rest in 2 nights. His nose is wrapped in a lavender-stuffed rag, but you can still see his lips curl when you wheel closer. Hard to tell anymore. You've grown used to smelling like bile and decay, like a stew no one wants to admit they've been simmering in. Some body collectors pry teeth for the gold. You haven't sunk that far yet. There's talk of a storm coming, and plague or no, wet bodies are heavier. You rinse your hands in a rain barrel that's gone green around the rim. Not that it helps, but you're not above untangling the string of beads and pocketing them. Donation, you whisper wryly. Probably wiped it off your boots and went for a pie afterward. Today, you've been summoned for a retrieval behind the church. You consider kicking one in, but decide not to tempt whatever spirits still care. St. Sepulchre's, like every other graveyard in the city, looks more like a war trench than holy ground. Trenches 3 bodies deep, then refilled with a hurried prayer, and a prayer that no dogs start digging. You've learned to look for such things. Valuable beads, stolen rings, coins hidden in sashes. The real trouble, though, isn't the body, it's the space. The parish yard's full, has been for days. So today, you cart him to the pit. Ah, yes, the pit. London's plague pits aren't just mass graves, they're entire ecosystems. You approach one near the city wall. You keep your rags soaked in vinegar, like they suggest, though you've mostly convinced yourself it's just superstition. You wait for the nod. Then, like tossing out yesterday's meat, you roll the man in. There's a debate, you recall, over whether some people were buried alive in these pits. And you swear just for a moment you hear a cough. Of course, it could be yours. The smell is worse than usual today, sweet and sharp. There's something else. Rats. They're breeding faster than priests can bless. The pit quivers with them. You blink back. You'll dream of that later. But for now, the sun is shifting westward. One of the younger collectors throws up. Rookie, you mutter, you don't even remember your first vomit. There's a strange numbness that settles over you, a fog thicker than the miasma the physicians keep warning about. Speaking of superstitions, someone's left charms near the pit. Little dolls made of straw. Instead, you light a tallow candle for the bell ringer. You don't know why. Maybe because no one else will. You watch the flame flicker, then die. That, too, you're used to. You crouch in front of the small wooden cart, trying to wedge another plank beneath the cracked wheel. It's one of those mornings when everything seems to resist your will ropes fray. Wheels stick, hinges break, and you're left improvising with whatever scrap lies around. The weight of the bodies doesn't help. Some are bloated, others rigid, and many leak fluids into the straw, no matter how tightly you wrap them. The cart groans beneath the load, its frame warped from weeks of use without rest, and fear, torn shields donated by a superstitious knight who claimed they carried bad luck. You even tried stuffing the wheels with straw once, hoping to absorb some shock from cobblestones. It worked for about 20 feet. Maybe they do, but the metal keeps the wood from snapping in half. One finger is always slipping off, so you wrap it in cloth held by a fish hook bent flat. A shutter bangs open above you, and someone hurls a wrapped shape from the second floor. It hits the cart with a thump, knocking loose a rib through the fabric. You sigh. Another day, another broken tie. The robe you wear used to be a monk's, dyed black, now speckled with stains. No amount of vinegar will lift. He lets them sway and shift like meat in a butcher's window. His cart has proper wheels, but no brakes. Last week, he crashed into a bread stall. No one laughed. The baker had already died. You even invented a trick where you wedge your knee into the axle to stop downhill momentum. It costs you a limp most nights, but it works. This one's lighter than most, probably a child. You wonder if their family watched from the window. The final bump before the pit sends a loose shoe flying from the cart, and you'll be there repairing Gertrude, preparing her to carry sorrow once more. You pick it up and place it gently on the smallest body. A gesture, a goodbye. You pat the cart. She made it. When the wheel axle breaks, you carve a new one from whatever beam you can salvage. When the ropes fray, you twist twine from old clothing. One day, you even stitched together your tunic from the sleeves of the dead. Practicality has no room for squeamishness. You wonder if they cared. You wonder if they had the strength to feel anything anymore. Then you stop wondering. It helps. You added a hood to shield your face, not for modesty, but to reduce the flies that dive-bomb your eyes with frustrating precision. Historians still argue whether Black Death body collectors had any form of standardized equipment, but no one handed you a toolkit. You've heard whispers that rats crawl into the gaps or fleas hide in the wood grain. Some men have tried burning their carts nightly. One man even painted his with pitch and lit it before every shift, hoping the smoke would protect him. He lasted a week before the fumes got him. You have to stay focused, especially when navigating the market square. The cobbles are uneven, and one of the bricks rises like a tooth from the earth, waiting to catch a wheel. You know exactly where it is, 12 feet from the broken stall, 6 feet before the well. You give a little jerk of the handle just in time. Gertrude lurches, but doesn't tip. Everything is improvised, patched, stitched together with trial and error. A wheel finally shifts with a creak, and you wipe your forehead with your sleeve, already soaked through. Welcome to the glamorous life of a plague-ridden essential worker. You didn't choose this cart. It chose you, left behind by a fleeing baker, half-burned from some panicked riot, then repurposed by your crew with spare nails, patches of cloth, and hope. You name it, Gertrude. It's ridiculous, but it helps, giving personality to the only companion you trust to carry the dead without complaint. She doesn't have a nose to wrinkle at the stench. Each day begins with repairs. The morning ritual of hammering, tightening, and whispering curses under your breath feels almost sacred. Without this cart, the bodies would remain on the streets longer. That means more rats, more flies, more infection. You learned that the hard way when you skipped repairs one morning and lost a wheel on Lombard Street. The pile of corpses spilled into the road. Children screamed. A woman fainted. You spent an hour collecting limbs like misplaced firewood. UVA tried to reinforce Gertrude's frame with bits of old armor breastplates rusted from rain for traction. You've replaced one of the wheels with a barrel ring, and while it makes turning awkward, it stops you from sliding in the mud. Your gloves, if you can call them that, are sewn from mismatched bits of leather. There's always debate among your peers about whether the carts themselves spread the plague. The wheel you fixed earlier shudders as you trundle down a narrow lane, just wide enough to pass between the leaning houses. You slow to adjust the load, carefully pulling the body back into alignment. You can't let emotion seep into this routine. You spot another cart nearby belonging to Matthew, the French collector who refuses to tie down his loads. There's no guild for cart repair, no instructions, no supply depot. You develop a sixth sense for balance, knowing which way to tilt, when to lean forward, when to brake with your heel. Gertrude screeches as you reach the cemetery gates. But you know that tomorrow another wheel will crack, another rope will snap, and another morning will begin with hammering and prayer. You don't think about your own funeral much these days, maybe because each day already feels like a rehearsal for one. Not in a peaceful, early Sunday kind of way, but in the eerie, post-storm kind of way. Like everyone ran for cover and never came back. Nothing. Then harder still, nothing. You listen. No coughing, no footsteps, no wailing, just silence, and the faint buzzing of flies. You brace your shoulder and shove until the warped wood cracks. A man, a woman, and a child, maybe 5 or 6. The man sits slumped in a chair, head tipped back, eyes dry and sunken. The woman lies in a curled heap by the fireplace. The child is still in bed, small and still, a stuffed lamb beside her. The smell hits you like a wave, sour, sweet, unbearable. You've grown used to death, but the thick, meat-sweet stench of rot still has a way of curling inside your nose and anchoring there like a bad tenant. Others claim the church insisted on full rites, even if only one prayer per 100 corpses. Either way, you do your own version now. You hum an old lullaby your mother used to sing while you dig and rebury. It's the only ritual that feels real. It's not a question. I'd like to ask you some things. You step carefully over the cobblestones, your cart creaking behind you like an old mourner. The rich leave, the poor die. The children die first, then the mothers, then, sometimes, the fathers linger too long. People like him usually want you to give them stories, but none of the ones you have come with clean endings. Still, he seems harmless enough. If this is retribution, you mutter, God has very bad aim. Symptoms before death, resistance among some families. It flies off when you look too long, just like yesterday's did. You've started recognizing them, these winged regulars. In a world so disordered, even scavengers begin to feel familiar. He's not a mourner or city official. He wears a scholar's robe, though it's tattered and rain-soaked. He introduces himself as Brother Laurentius. Apparently, he's been chronicling the plague-taking notes on who dies, when, and how. His idea of science, you suppose. You, re-heading toward the Taylor S. District toward S. Gotten out about a house locked from the inside, where no one's been seen in days. His ink freezes a moment in the cold, and he huffs, trying to warm it. Eventually, he looks up and asks, "Do you think this is punishment?" And when people go that quiet, you know what that means. You whisper a few words, you dainty entirely believe something. Halfway between a prayer and a goodbye, begin the work. The streets are emptier this morning. You rap gently on the heavy wooden door with the heel of your boot. Kicking the door open isn't elegant, but it works. Inside, the house is a tomb. Curtains drawn, food rotting on a table, and 3 bodies in varying degrees of collapse. You don't pause long. Not anymore. Back outside, a neighbor watches from across the street. The weight is lighter now, but your legs feel like they're made of soaked wool. Another pit filled, another family gone, another day survived. She doesn't speak, doesn't even nod, just stares. A pit has reopened after last night's storm, rain, and time shifting the topsoil just enough to expose the edge of a decomposing sleeve. You sigh and get to work with your shovel. Again, you're not sure if it's fear or gratitude, or both, or neither. People are strange during plague years. You roll onward. Later that day, you find yourself back in the northern quarter, where the plague pits have grown into a bizarre kind of architecture-mounded shapes under dirt, marked with crude crosses or nothing at all. You wonder how long you can keep doing this. Historians still argue whether plague pits were always properly consecrated. Some say priests refused to bless mass graves after a while, seeing them as lost causes. As the sun dips, a thin man approaches you. "You're a collector," he says. You nod cautiously. "Have you noticed any patterns?" he asks. You shrug. He scribbles furiously. You watch him for a while. You pause. That question again. "I think," you say slowly, "it's just what happens when people live too close, too dirty, and too proud." He blinks. "So, not divine retribution." You glance around at the bloated pit, the half-covered sleeve, the clouds thick with ash and smoke. He laughs, surprised, then apologetic. You bid him farewell and push your cart back toward the city. You notice a crow watching from the rooftop, head cocked, feathers sleek against the breeze. And tomorrow you'll meet them again. The sun barely rises above the rooftops when you, reshaken from your fragile sleep by the slow creak of a cartwheel outside your lodging. Another collector's already begun their route, probably Elias, the quiet one with the missing toe. You jingle it half-heartedly as you pass a bakery with its shutters closed, not from mourning, just vacancy. The baker died last week. You found him slumped over his oven, still clutching a wooden paddle. You wonder, idly, if the final loaf was ever eaten. Probably not. You swing your legs off the straw mat, tie a rag over your mouth. Dust lime around the bodies, especially at the joints and mouths. Neighbors peek from behind curtains, watching with the same mixture of relief and revulsion. Someone shouts, "God bless you." Another slams a shutter. Your back complains with every lift. The merchant's heavier than he looks. Velvet robes add weight. Or maybe it's just guilt. The water's bitter, but it's wet. You glance at your hands. Even under gloves, they look wrong, cracked, discolored. Your fingertips always feel numb now. One of the older collectors says it's a sign. You don't want to know of what. You whisper a prayer, not because you believe, but because it feels wrong not to. Dirt falls over silk and rags alike. That one merchant brought it in with a shipment of dyed silks from Venice, a place once bustling with barter, laughter, and noise. Now just a hollow corridor of whispers, secrets, and velvet-clad corpses. Historians still argue whether rats or goods, or even breath itself, spread the Black Death so quickly. But in your experience, it doesn't much matter. Death just ... finds a way. You try not to imagine what the boy's final moments were like. Did he cry for his mother? Or did he die first, and she followed in grief? Here, death comes behind locked doors, in rooms filled with velvet, coin chests, and failed prayers. These weren't people used to being ignored, but now no one dares cross their thresholds. Not unless you have to, like you. You dress in your layered garb, still stiff with the grime of days past, and splash your face with water that stinks faintly of iron. It's chewing something in the alley. You step closer. It growls, baring its teeth. The thing it's gnawing on is a hand. You let out a shaky breath and chase it off, but not before noticing the ring on the finger, a merchant's seal. A silk merchant's apprentice, reported missing days ago. You find him in the storeroom beneath the shop, curled into a shelf between bolts of damask. He smells of cinnamon somehow. Maybe he thought the cloth would hide him from death. You lift him gently. He couldn't have been more than 15. Another body unaccounted for. A tattered cloth hangs from the knocker, a black scrap, tied in the fashion dictated by the city wardens. A plague mark. You rap on the door anyway, just to follow protocol. No answer, of course. You test the handle with a gloved hand. It gives way easily, and inside, the air is so thick with perfume, you gag. Church bells. Not for prayer. There's no service anymore, but for tallying. A single chime for every death that day. You lose count after 30. It's obvious someone tried to mask the stench, but failed. Clove oil, myrrh, vinaigrets, like walking into a spice trader's coffin. No time to be delicate. Today you're tasked with the most treacherous area, the merchant quarter. You shoulder your sack of lime and your worn bell. The bell's clapper is almost rusted through. The merchant quarter is a different beast from the slums or the outer hovels. You arrive at the first townhouse, its once bright facade streaked with rain and soot. Inside, you find them, 3 bodies, carefully arranged by the hearth. A woman in silk, her hair still styled, a boy, barely 12, clutching a wooden horse. A man, likely the merchant, dressed in finery, mouth open in a final breathless protest. You don't pause long. The living don't want the dead on display, not even the rich ones. You work methodically. Carting them outside is worse. You hear whispers everywhere in this quarter, that the plague spares the truly virtuous, that the disease enters through pride or sin. As you finish loading the cart, you notice a dog, thin, with patchy fur and yellow eyes. By midday, your cart groans under its burden. You pause at a well to drink. You make one final collection before heading to the pit. As you walk your heavy cart to the edge of town, the bells behind you start to ring. At the pit, you unload the bodies with practiced solemnity. As the sun begins to drop, casting red across the cobbles, you look back at the merchant quarter, and you walk home slower today. A sudden crack of thunder rattles the beams overhead. The storm outside is relentless, pelting the rooftops of Paris with sheets of cold rain. And yet here you are, dragging a soaked, fly-bitten corpse into a courtyard behind a merchant's home. The stench is no worse than usual. Your nose is dulled to it now, but the mud, that's new. Every step is a filthy suction cup of wet muck. The body had collapsed in the doorway of the tailor's shop, one hand frozen mid-knock, as if it had been seeking shelter from the coming storm. You and Michelle had to pry the stiffened fingers from the wooden frame. The carts get stuck more easily, the corpses bloat faster, and fewer people are willing to peek outside and help. They're moving like you do, slow, stiff, automated. The filth of the streets, already dense with waste, turned to slush. Sewers overflowed. Wells became contaminated. In cities like Florence and Paris, entire neighborhoods became uninhabitable swamps. As one monk noted, another mourner, or maybe just someone checking if it's safe to emerge. You wave absently, nothing threatening, just a half-human motion meant to reassure. The figure disappears. Sometimes you feel more ghost than man yourself. Some historians still argue whether waterborne illnesses compounded the devastation, or if the rains simply made misery more visible. You wonder if they even see you anymore, or if they're locked in their own haze. It's just you and the other collectors, your soggy brethren in misery. He made a joke about it being the only customer left in town. You didn't laugh. You're too tired to pretend anymore. There's another body slumped against a tree nearby, likely washed out of another street. You head that way because that's what you do. Water sprays up your leg. You don't flinch. Rain or not, your duties don't pause. In fact, storms make everything worse. So many faces turn skyward, mouths open, as if still gasping for something. No crying, no bells, no shouting, just rain. You glance around and find that your team has gone ahead, and you're standing alone beside the trench, ankle deep in muddy death. You used to place them gently. Now you toss them, careful only not to let one roll back out. The roads are treacherous today, cobblestones, slick alleyways turned into rivulets. You slip once, nearly cracking your skull on the edge of a barrel. Locals couldn't fathom how these men seemed to survive while handling so many infected. Some were lynched, others paid handsomely. Fate tossed dice in strange ways. Scholars still debate whether some of these survivors had natural immunity, sheer luck, or just kept their noses plugged better. Michelle hauls you up with a grunt, muttering, "One of us has to stay upright." By this point, you've developed a morbid rhythm. Would they toss you in with the others? Would Michelle say anything? Or just another nod, another load? A pyre had stood there once, but the rain put an end to burning. Now it's just a long, waterlogged ditch, filling fast with the dead. You're up to your knees in mud, bracing a body by the arms, trying not to vomit as a rat darts out from beneath it. The wheel of the cart creaks in harmony with your footsteps. The slap of soaked cloth dragging behind you sounds like a metronome set to despair. A neighbor opens a shutter to peer out, and you lock eyes for a moment. You don't know their name, but you know the look. Fear edged with guilt. They'll bolt the shutters tighter after you pass. That's the way it is now. You're more plague than person to them. Inside the carts, corpses stack like firewood. Tonight, you're headed to a temporary trench dug near the charred remains of St. Lazare. Lightning cracks again, revealing the silhouette of another collector across the trench, someone from the other side of the city. Historical records confirm that heavy rains during plague years often exacerbated the spread. As you toss another body into the trench, it splashes with a sickening thud. Michelle points out a cloaked figure watching from beneath a balcony. A strange moment comes when you realize it's quiet. You should move, but instead, for a second, you just stare down at the heap in the ditch. There's a lull in the storm. The silence makes space for a thought you try not to entertain. If you fell in Nif, your heart simply stopped. Mid-task, how long before someone noticed? And here's a fun tidbit. During peak plague times, some trench diggers were accused of witchcrafts. Seriously, you pull your hood tighter. The wind is biting now. You collect what's left of the city, no matter the weather, no matter the number. The morning fog clings to your coat as you step into yet another alleyway, the kind so narrow to bodies can barely pass. The buildings lean toward one another, like old friends sharing secrets. And somewhere behind a shutter, a child coughs with the brittle crackle that now raises the hairs on your neck. You no longer pause to listen. You can't afford to not, emotionally, not physically, but in this next home, someone is waiting for you. It's not a body. She doesn't cry. Those who still have tears left are rare. Her husband lies in the corner, on a pallet of straw, breathing in short, wet gasps. It won't help, not truly, but it gives him the strength to sleep. And sleep, these days, feels like mercy. The black buboes swell against his throat like ripening plums. You step closer, more out of instinct than choice. The strange part, you've begun granting it. You used to see your job in absolutes. Collect the dead, keep the tally, move on. But as the weeks drag into months, the lines blur. Sometimes you carry bodies. Sometimes you carry hope. And sometimes you carry guilt. Now you're staying a little longer each time. Not yet. It's someone who believes you're their only hope. Slow, weak, but steady. You whisper that you'll return by nightfall. The woman nods, holding back a sob. The woman greets you with a face drawn tight as cloth. He meets your eyes. Those areas will be sealed by dusk. You don't want to be caught inside, not with fear. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being just a collector. You became a witness. You're not a healer, but somehow they don't care. You wear the mask. You bear the smell of vinegar. You have survived this long. that makes you something in their eyes, something more than flesh, not with anger. You won't. Inside, a cat curls beside a basket of stale loaves, watching you as if guarding treasure. Not just rot but stagnation. The fires burn lower. The streets seem stiller, as if the plague is running out of people. You pause to drink from your flask, just water, tinged faintly with lemon balm. You savor it more than you'd admit. Not until the fever breaks, or he does. With a silent plea, he sings still. Means the air's not bad here. Mama said so. 8, 9, shirt torn, barefoot, holding a small bird cage. Inside, a blackbird chirps faintly. The boy's face is smudged, but his eyes are clear, too clear. Her fingers are shaking, her skin warm, her eyes red from sleepless nights. He's still here, she says, as if begging you not to take him just yet. You don't carry medicine. You give him a few drops of rosemary tincture you've hoarded in your pouch. The wife presses her hand to yours. But personal accounts hint at a messier truth, that in the heart of a dying city, some chose to linger. You nod. This isn't the first time someone's begged you for time, for him. Historians still argue whether plague workers ever tried to act as healers. Some records suggest they simply avoided all risk and left the dying to their fate. A month ago, you might have turned away, and perhaps that's dangerous. You check his pulse once more. As you leave, she calls after you. You look tired, she says. Please, rest when you can. That catches you off guard. You walk back into the street, your head lowered, not from exhaustion, but from something closer to shame. And now you carry something heavier than body. You carry the stories of the dying. The bell rings against 2 quick chimes from the North Tower. That means new quarantines are being enforced. You instinctively reroute. You pass an empty bakery. A sign still hangs crookedly from its door. Back at noon. But noon came and went 2 weeks ago. The city smells worse now. You climb the hill toward the next district, where the sun pierces through a canopy of tangled wood beams and tattered cloth canopies. That's when a young boy approaches. Sir, he says, do you want to buy him? You blink. Buy what? The bird. You crouch. Where's your mama now? You ask. He shrugs. Asleep, I think. Been 3 days. Your chest tightens. You press a coin into his hand. Not for the bird. Go east, you tell him. There's a monastery taking people in. Ask for Brother Mateo. He nods solemnly. Will the bird help? Only if you listen to it, you say. You don't watch him go. You can't. There's too much to do. You trudge forward, the sounds of the city muffled beneath layers of grief, memory, and dust. But for a moment, you think you hear the blackbird sing behind you. By late 1349, something cracks inside you. Maybe it's the endless rows of corpses. Maybe it's the screams of mothers trying to give their dead children a proper goodbye before you rip them away. Or maybe it is just the smell that clings to you even when you scrub with ashes and vinegar. Either way, you begin to understand why so many body collectors quit or disappeared. But you don't. You keep going. Why? That's a question you ask yourself each night as you try and fail to sleep. The answer is partly survival. You've grown used to the meager pay and crusts of bread. But it's also because, in this role, you have purpose. You lie in coffins, feel the earth falling on your chest. You choke on air that isn't there. Historians still argue whether these psychological breaks among plague workers were true madness or a natural response to sustained trauma. You suspect it's both. You're sane, technically, but something inside you is bending. You apologize, promise to be gentle. One time, you name a girl you carry Isabel, even though you know nothing about her. He's burning incense, muttering prayers. He sees you and flinches, but then he does something odd. Not because you believe it protects you, but because it feels like the first unselfish gesture anyone's made toward you in months. He hands you a small wooden cross, carved roughly, like by a child. Boil your gloves. Hang your mask above the hearth like a relic. She watches you roll by, eyes wide, no fear, just curiosity. You tip your hat, the one you've worn since day one. She smiles, and for a fleeting moment, you remember you were once a child too. One tried to dig his own grave and climb inside. You're one of the last, which makes you valuable and dangerous. You even begin placing herbs around your sleeping space, not because you think they help, but because the smell is nicer than death. You slip more often on icy stairs. Once, you fall and cut your cheek. It's minor, but panic wells up. Any break in your skin is a possible entry point. If caught spreading stories or unnatural thoughts, you'll be dismissed or worse. You understand. They don't want panic, but they don't understand that silence is what fuels it. You clean it obsessively, douse it with spirits. Then you wait 3 days. No fever, just the usual nightmares. Keep it, he says, eyes sad. You shouldn't have to walk this path alone. You hum lullabies you haven't heard since your own childhood. When did this start? You don't remember. A grim one, yes, but still people fear you, yes, but they also need you. Without you, the city would drown in rot. Still, your mind is slipping. You find yourself talking to the bodies sometimes, especially the children. There's another shift too. People begin calling you Crow. The moonlight becomes your closest companion, silvering the bodies and casting long, thin shadows. The one who never dies. The one who always comes back. You move like a ghost through the alleyways, more silent than even the rats. Not just for your beaked mask, but because they say you circle the dead like the bird. Someone even paints a crude bird on your cart. You don't mind. It feels fitting, like you've become something beyond human, a symbol, or maybe a shadow. There's growing suspicion, though, not of you personally, but of all collectors. Rumors circulate that you're spreading the plague, not removing it, that your carts are cursed, that if someone sees your shadow pass by, their soul will leave them. People spit behind your back, mutter prayers when you approach. A few times, you're nearly attacked. You begin working more at night. Fewer people, fewer glares, just darkness and the scrape of wheels over cobblestone. You notice your dreams shifting too. You're not just dreaming of death, you're dreaming as the dead. One night, you encounter a priest outside a crumbling chapel. You keep it. Winter returns. The streets freeze. Bodies stiffen faster, almost brittle. Your gloves stick to the skin if you're not careful. You become more cautious. Wash your hands after every run. By now, most of the other collectors you started with are gone. Some succumbed, some fled. There's a new edict from the town council. Collectors may not speak of what they see. So, you stop speaking, mostly. You let your boots and cart speak for you. You become the shadow they whisper about. One night, you pass a child in a window, pressing her hand to the glass. Your arms ache with every pull of the cart. The wooden wheels rattle against the cobblestones, clattering in eerie harmony with the groans that echo from shuttered windows. There's no sound of birdsong here, no cheerful clamor of market stalls. Most of the stalls are gone now, their awnings sagging with mildew, their counters warped and stained. A week ago, this lane reeked of rotting trout. Now, it smells like absence. Emptiness has a censure, certain of it. Now it sits silent, its bright colors faded by ash and dust. You knock, no answer. You try again. A muffled voice responds, then silence. You open your pouch, take out the vinegar-soaked rag you carry everywhere, and press it to her brow. It doesn't help. Nothing ever does, not really. You tell the boy gently to step outside. He obeys, but slowly. You hear shuffling. Then the familiar scrape of wood on wood as a door is reluctantly unbarred. On the table, a broken comb, a dented tin cup. A sound comes from behind a curtain, soft, fragile, a baby's cry, barely audible. Little signs that this was once a home, not a hospice. You whisper a prayer not out of faith, but because it feels rude not to. Kind of like musty linen left out in the rain. Murky, her cheeks are flushed. She's alive for now, unfocused, but some leave someone behind. And what do you do then? You're a body collector, not a midwife, not a father, not a savior. But the rules blur in these moments. Just steps forward and strokes the baby's cheek. But she grabs your wrist with surprising strength. Her mouth moves. You lean closer. The mother exhales, as if passing something invisible to you. Barely older than 10, hollow-eyed and clutching a ladle. He doesn't speak. You've just added 2 more lives to your burden, and 1 less to your cart. You gently close her lids with your fingers, like you've done 100 times before. Not rats, not dogs, cats. It's said they'd curl beside someone just hours before their final breath. You glance behind you, and sure enough, there's a tabby watching from a rooftop, tail flicking. Go figure. No matter how practiced, it never stops feeling intimate, just stares. Behind him, a woman lies curled on a straw mat. Her breathing is ragged, her skin pale, blistered, streaked with sweat. You step inside without waiting for permission. The boy follows wordlessly as you push the cart down the alley. The bodies shift slightly with the jolt, but the baby doesn't stir. She's asleep again. It's not kindness, it's protocol. Historians still argue whether fishmongers were hit especially hard due to handling infected goods, or whether they simply lived in more crowded quarters. Either way, you've hauled more than a few bloated bodies from behind those shuttered storefronts. Just the steady crunch of your boots over dried mud and ash, and something else UVA stopped naming. Gervais has gone to find his cousin in the countryside, though you both know it, slightly too late. Not really. You push the cart by yourself, groaning under the weight of your solitary burden. 2 bodies draped in canvas, collected earlier from the abbey steps. You keep one hand pressed to your chest, where a necklace dangles a tiny token, a carved wooden lamb from your childhood, which you now wear more for superstition than sentiment. You turn onto a familiar alley near the fishmongers' district, or what used to be the fishmongers' district. Tonight, you're alone. You stop outside a townhouse you've passed many times. Its exterior once looked cheerful. Red shutters, flower boxes, a painted door. A young boy opens it. You squat beside her, noting the telltale signs. Buboes beneath her arm, dried blood around her gums. You glance around. In one corner, a basket of boiled cabbage, untouched. The woman opens her eyes. She's still in the cradle. She breathes. You blink. You're not ready for this. You pull the curtain aside. There she is. A tiny infant, no more than a few months old, swaddled in damp cloth. Here's the thing they don't prepare you for. Most people die alone. You take the baby in your arms. She whimpers, but doesn't resist. By the time you turn back, her eyes are open, but unseeing. Outside, the boy stands with his fists clenched. She's gone, you say softly. He nods, but you can see it hasn't registered. Is she your sister? You ask. He doesn't reply. You know what you should do. Take the bodies, return the baby to the church orphanage, walk away. But instead, you kneel. Come with me, you whisper. For now, you wrap the baby more tightly, tucking the cloth against the evening breeze. The city stretches before you dark, broken, breathless. And you, oh, and about that fringe tidbits. Some folks back then swore cats could smell the dying. The rain starts falling as you heave the cart's handles up the sloped alley behind St. Jude. Mud slicks your boots as if the earth itself wants to pull you down with the dead. The wheels groan against the stones, burdened with too many swollen limbs and faces twisted mid-scream. You feel every muscle in your back protest as the wood rattles in protest. You shouldn't be out here alone, but the others have vanished, half sick, half dead, and the rest too scared to face what waits at the edge of the graveyard. I'll offer myself, he said, eyes lit up like torches. So the Lord will spare the rest. You had to wrestle him down and tie him to a post. He didn't resist, just sang. The clergy used to oversee all burials with solemnity and Latin chants. A Franciscan, perhaps. No, to clean. Too fast. No smell of sweat or lavender oil. Some say the church now sends angels into the streets, figures in white, who record the names of the dead and mark homes with chalk. Others say they're not from the church at all, but survivors from the East with charms and powders to ward off the pestilence. You call out just once, kneeling beside the cot, arms trembling. Deliver us from evil, you mumble, but the words stick. You can't finish. Your own breath turns sour in your throat. Evil isn't something you can name anymore. It wears too many faces. The figure vanishes into the mist like a breath you didn't take. You crawl under the blanket, every joint sore, your fingers already curling into themselves. You're not sure which is worse, the dying or the waiting. The Pope once ordered fires lit to cleanse the air. Historians still debate whether it saved anyone or just soothed a guilty conscience. A rumor says the Pope himself sat between two blazing pyres for weeks, the smoke curling into his robes as he conducted PayPal business behind veils of ash. Whether that's true or not, you can't say. The smell of burning herbs and incense now clings to every church you pass. A child's drawing underneath it shows a ladder snapped in two. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it feels realer than anything the bishop ever said, like a disguise. Now, if you catch a priest outside the abbey walls, it's either a hallucination or a suicide mission. They ring in the morning and again at dusk, but they're not for prayer anymore. They're body counts, 1 toll per 10 dead. You've heard as many as 50 in a day. Monasteries have turned inward, barricading their libraries and chambers. Prayer has become private, whispered behind thick doors. He whispers that the bishop's body was found stuffed into a wine barrel. He tried to run, Tomas says, took the treasury gold. The monks sealed the barrel and buried it under the chapel. You shake your head, but don't question it. Everyone's stories now seem both ridiculous and entirely plausible. Some monks are still copying scripture, as if the plague is just a passing storm. Others burn manuscripts, convinced the Latin phrases carry demonic power. Historians still argue whether the church's retreat was strategic, survivalist, or cowardly. You've stopped wondering. You're the one out here, not them. You pass the broken statue of Saint Sebastian, his face now smeared with bird droppings, bound arrow wounds, worn smooth by rain. Once people lit candles here. Now it's just another landmark on the way to the pits. Now they're monstrous gashes in the earth, dug wider by soldiers and prisoners. A boy, maybe 12, cloaked, dirty, standing too close for someone who's just curious. You shout at him, and he runs, but not before your lantern catches the glint of a badge around his neck, a scapular. Maybe he's an acolyte, or maybe he est one of the new wave of young penitents who believe the Black Death is God's punishment and want to help cleanse the world. No one cares about spacing anymore. You dump the latest load. A woman's arm flops against another's neck. One child's head rolls to the side, mouth still open. You try to look away but can't. That's the strange thing. Familiarity doesn't breed indifference, it breeds obsession. You pause beside it, only to cough again, deep, chesty, and dry. Is it fatigue, the chill, or is it your time ticking? The pits have changed. The early ones were shallow, neatly arranged. Tonight, you spot someone watching. A few nights ago, you caught one trying to leap into the pit voluntarily. The clergy have no answers. The bells still toll, though. As you walk back, shoulders aching, a figure in white passes you going the opposite way. In the abbey courtyard, you find fresh graffiti scratched into the stone. Dios ha cerrado los cielos. God has closed the heavens. A fellow collector, Tomas, joins you later, face pale and lips cracked. You try praying that night. Then the wind howls through the shutters. A hymn rises faintly from the church across the square. Maybe real, maybe not. The rhythm of your days has changed, and with it, so has your soul. By now, you don't just recognize the sound of a corpse cart's wheel squeaking, you anticipate it. You trudge through it with your cart, the wheels struggling over uneven stones. A dog follows you for a few blocks. You name it Plague, because why not? It's got one eye, a crooked tail, and the kind of loyalty only stray animals and desperate friends can offer. The sharp crack of wood on cobblestone, the grunt of oxen pulling against the weight of the dead. You don't know her name, but every few days she offers you a bowl of something vaguely edible, and you nod your thanks. She never speaks. You're not sure she can. You're not supposed to read these things, but you do. Of course you do. It's short, written in a neat hand. The elite don't like being reminded that their gold rings can't protect them. That death comes for silk and rags alike. You don't know if the writer survived or not. You cradle her, just for a moment, and place her down with care, away from the rest. This isn't about class or plague cycles. This is about what little scraps of humanity you can preserve before you rot from the inside out. You look like you could use it, he says, before vanishing back inside. Probably not. The gate is slightly ajar, swinging with a haunting creak, half remembered, maybe not even a real prayer. No one answers the door, but a note is pinned to it, trembling in the breeze. Inside, no joke here, just a moment of quiet mercy. You won't use the soap today. You want to save it, like a keepsake. Please be gentle. She was only 10, and the somber lull of nearby weeping, these form the strange soundtrack of your life. The smell of roses still clings to the edges of the neighborhood, masking but not fully hiding the sweet sour odor of death. Today begins in a fog, both literal and mental. The early morning air is thick, almost gelatinous, pressing against your skin like a damp rag. You don't toss her. You kneel and set her down gently in the earth. And then, for the first time in a long time, you whisper a prayer. You pass what used to be a tavern. Now, it's a shelter for abandoned children, snot-covered, wide-eyed, and half-starved. A woman watches over them. Then, around mid-morning, you're called to a wealthier part of town, a part that had remained untouched longer than most. There are days where even you, hardened as you are, can't help but feel. You find the girl upstairs, laid out on a velvet blanket, arms crossed like a little saint. A white ribbon is still in her hair. Someone took great care in this, perhaps a nurse or a mother who didn't make it. Here, you're not just a body collector. You're a liability. You're directed to a tall stone house with wooden shutters, real glass in the windows, fancy stuff. Your stomach knots. There's also a letter beside her, addressed to whom it may concern. If you bury her with love, I will believe there is still some good in this world. Take the silver beneath her pillow. It's yours. And indeed, there are 3 silver coins. You wrap the girl gently in the blanket. You don't toss her into the cart like usual. Historians still argue whether upper-class children were really given more respect in death, or whether it just depended on who was watching. But to you, this is personal now. As you leave the house, a servant, emaciated but upright, shuffles toward you and hands you something unexpected. A linen-wrapped bundle of soap, dried herbs, and a clean rag. This is an act of grace. That evening, as you unload the girl's body near the communal pit, you pause. It's clumsy. Then Plague, the one-eyed dog, lets out a soft whine and rests his head on your boot. And for a flicker of time, maybe 5 heartbeats, you don't feel entirely alone. You have begun to dream of the dead again. Not in the grotesque nightmare sense, those you've long since trained yourself to push aside, but in quieter, stranger ways. Sometimes your father walks beside you as you pull your cart. Even the birds seem to have left London, and the rats scurry more openly than ever. Your ears, once attuned to the moans of the infected or the scream of a mother losing her child, now pick up only the creaking of wood and the occasional cough echoing from a darkened alley. Other times, a woman you once loved, whose name you can no longer recall, watches from an upstairs window with sad, glassy eyes. The buboes have not come for you yet, but you know the cost of breathing this air day after day. Your fingertips sting. Your joints throb. The upper floors are scorched, the result of a fire, you recall, meant to cleanse the infected homes with smoke. It failed. The plague remained, and the residents did not. Every breath carries with it the question, will this be the one? The early days were filled with such temptations, lockets, coins, hidden in boots, but now you barely have the strength or stomach. This time, however, your fingers are guided more by curiosity than greed. But in your heart, you've come to think of your work not as punishment or necessity, but as ritual. A group of plague doctors dancing in a drunken line, mocking death. The sound of bells, so many bells, but there's something different here, too. Not just despair, but reflection, even, somehow, beauty. The slow unraveling of faith. The days he watched his wife deteriorate, the prayers he offered, the silence that followed. The world around you narrows to ink and paper and memory. Not hope, not exactly, but maybe the ghost of it. A sacred task. The city has no priests left, no last rites. You are the closest thing these souls will have to a farewell. A stranger who carried a dying woman to miles so she wouldn't be alone. Not as a commentary, not as an editor, but as a companion. The ones who died with their eyes wide open, staring into something beyond your understanding. They've grown quieter, too, less inclined to joke. One of them, old Jeffrey, nods toward a small pile of stone markers at the edge of the pit. A few names have been etched into them, though most are blank. For those who wrote their own, he murmurs. A priest who stayed behind after his flock fled, administering final blessings until the plague took him. Darker clouds gathering, it might rain by evening. And you know that wet wood and wet linen rot fast. You press on, collecting what you can, because for the first time you are not just a collector of the dead. The cart is half full by the time you turn toward St. Mary's again. A midwife who delivered a child in a home already lost to fever. They never speak, they only watch. The silence of the city has deepened. You kneel down, check for signs of breath, but he's been gone for hours. Flies buzz gently around his mouth. Your cart rolls slower these days. Not because there are fewer bodies, though there are, but because your limbs ache in ways they didn't before. And yet, you keep going. The guild offers no reward for perseverance. The coin is no heavier for those who last a year than for those who last a week. Today you walk a street near Cheapside, one you haven't visited in weeks. In one of the doorways lies a man, half covered in a tattered cloak. His legs twisted beneath him as if he'd stumbled and simply given up. It's not his death that catches you off guard, but what you find beneath him. A small satchel, and within it a sheaf of papers. You rarely pry into the dead's belongings anymore. The papers are journals, pages upon pages, in careful script, chronicling not just the plague, but the writer's descent. You sit back against the wall and read, just for a while, as the wind picks up dust and ash from the street. He describes sights you've seen yourself. A child left on the steps of a shuttered church. In the margins, he writes of the kindnesses he witnessed. You feel something strange stir in you. You tuck the journal into your own bag. The sky is changing. There, the gravediggers are waiting. And suddenly, you understand. The journal wasn't just a witness. It was a monument, a grave marker made of words. That night, back in your quarters, you light a candle and begin to write in the margins of the journal. You write of the people you've buried, the ones who had no names, the ones who clutched crucifixes. You write of the man with the painted mask, and the woman who sang lullabies to no one, and the girl who gave you an apple when you could barely stand. You write your name, not for vanity, for memory, because if this journal survives, perhaps you will too. The winds howl that night, rattling the shutters and setting your candle to dance. But you feel steadier than you have in months. You are their witness, and that, somehow, feels like redemption. You trudge into a fog-drenched alley where the mists have swallowed sound, form, and memory alike. Your lantern casts a halo that seems swallowed by the wet wool of the air. Every step makes your knees ache. You're not sure if it's from exertion, cold, or something else clawing up through your bones. The mule refuses to go further, its breath steaming heavily in the air. It shuffles, restless. That's always a bad sign. You've learned to trust the animals more than the people. You pause. The bell you wear clinks softly. In the fog, something returns the sound, not an echo. Then it begins again. Ding, 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 at your pace. The hairs on your neck rise like frost needles. A reply, a second bell. The figure vanishes into mist, not turning, not running, just ceasing to be. You turn back, nearly dragging the mule. You don't look back, faint, measured, mimicking your rhythm. That same polished mask, that perfect flame, the bell, their mask is smoother, polished, and in their hand not a lantern, but a candle, untouched by wind or wet. Its flame burns perfectly upright. You freeze. No one should be out here now. The silence that follows is total. Too fresh, still warm. Your breath catches in your throat as the fog parts just enough to reveal a figure, a cloaked person in the same long coat and bird-like mask as you, standing completely still, another collector. But the bell they hold is not rusted like yours. You take a step forward, so do they. You raise your bell, they raise theirs. Suddenly your mule brays in terror and rears, breaking the moment. Your heart pounds. You never go back to that alley again. But from then on, you are not alone in the streets, where the dead don't rest and the collectors keep marching. Others, hundreds, thousands, across time. In the weeks that follow, you catch glimpses, always just ahead, or behind, or on rooftops. At first you fear it's a symptom of fever, of madness. But then you overhear others. A tanner's boy whispering of the pale collector. A washerwoman swearing she saw a bird-faced man at her window, unmoving through the night. A gravedigger, old and mostly drunk, muttering, "Some don't come to collect the dead, some come to watch the living." You stop walking alone. You accepted death's coin and now serve in its name. One evening, while stacking the last bodies into the cart, you find one already laid atop the pile. The limbs curled neatly, the body fresh, and next to the hand, a perfect white feather, dry, clean, with a fresh candle inside. You stagger back. The cart shifts, and from inside, buried under the plague-ridden, the feathered mask peers up at you. Reverence, no sound, no movement. You slam the lid shut. You don't scream. Instead, you work faster than ever before, praying louder than you have in months, your hands trembling with every rope you tie. You think you've gone mad. But the dreams start. Always the same. You walk through streets not quite like yours, the sky a heavy ash, your bell clinking, the others following, always following. And you realize there's a world beside this one, or beneath it. Not just you, not just the pale one. The uniform binds you to something older than the plague, older than cities, maybe older than death itself. The bird mask is not just protection, it is recognition. It's how the others find you. You wake, gasping, soaked with sweat, and touch your face. Sometimes you find soot on your fingertips. You begin to believe you were chosen, not by a guild, not by the magistrate, but by something deeper. You try to quit. You burn your coat. You smash the bell. You toss your mask into the Seine. But the next day, it's waiting on your doorstep. And the moment you touch it, you feel calm. That night, you collect again. You tell no one. You move silently. You begin to feel pride. The city is dying, yes, but the work is eternal. Some days, you swear you see the fog bow to you, and in your dreams, the watchers kneel. You wake just before dawn, the aching quiet of your joints mirroring the hush that has fallen over the city. It's the final stage. Now though, not because the plague has ended. It hasn't. But there are so few people left to die that the carts fill like they once did. The ditches gape open, but remain mostly empty, the earth swallowing fewer souls than before. You throw in a frail woman whose hands are still clasped in prayer, rosary wound tight around bony fingers. You don't know her name. You don't need to. You still collect the fallen, but now you do it slowly, solemnly, almost reverently. Every door you knock on, you half expect silence. And silence is often what you receive. Your team has thinned. Not a death bell this time. A church bell, rusted, fragile, but it rings. Of the 10 who once rode with you, only to remain. But because, for the first time, in what feels like 100 lifetimes, you want to go toward something. Old Gaetan is gun-succumbed in his sleep, face frozen in a strange half-smile. Elodie left in the night without a word. And young Toma, you still don't know. He simply stopped showing up. And in these times, that's as final an answer as any. The piles at the mass graves are no longer high, but you've come to understand something deeper. You are a witness, a bearer of memory. When the survivors crawl back from the ashes, when the churches reopen, a single ray touches the edge of a ruined cathedral where pigeons flutter like timid spirits. You lean on your cart and breathe in. The scent is still there, faint but persistent. But so is something else wind, clean and cold, sweeping in from the hills. And merchants rebuild their stalls, when children are born once more, and the air forgets the stench of Ratu will remember. You've stopped crying. Even your anger has long since dissolved into a brittle numbness. You don't believe in punishment anymore, nor in deliverance. The clergy say this is a scourge from God. But what God would silence the laughter of children and leave rats to inherit the streets? Still, each night, you kneel by your cot and whisper the same words, not for salvation, but to remember you're still human. I carried them with care. I gave them rest. I did not turn away. At times, you feel like a ghost yourself, drifting through a city of shades, and someone must. You finish your final route as the sun edges up over the blackened rooftops. In the silence of the square, you hear the faint tolling of a bell. You take a step toward it, then another. Not because it's your duty, not because you have bodies to collect. And behind you, in the hush of the dawn, the cart. And so, in the soft hush that follows, you simply stand there, listening to that distant bell as it trembles through the cold morning air. It is not loud, nor proud, nor polished. It is worn, cracked, perhaps, like everything that has endured too long, but still it sings. But just touching it like one might touch a page in a book after reading the final line. You look around at the city, so battered, so quiet, but still here. The sky, once so heavy and low, is clearing. A pale blue slowly pushes through the haze, shy and uncertain, like a child stepping out into the light after hiding for too long. That lone note, carried gently on the breeze, is not a sound of mourning. Not this time. It's something else, faint but familiar. A murmur of the world, remembering how to breathe again. You remain beside your cart for a while longer, your fingers resting lightly against the wood, no longer gripping it out of duty or desperation, one foot in front of the other. No destination in mind, just a soft knowing that whatever comes next, it will not be faced alone. You close your eyes, The wind brushes your face, cool and clean, tugging softly at your sleeves as if guiding you forward, not with urgency, but with patience. And the wind carries it away, across the rooftops and through the empty streets, until it fades into nothing. No more shouting, no more wailing, no more bells calling the dead. Just this stillness, just this peace. And perhaps, just perhaps, in the sacred silence left behind, something is beginning again. You step away from the cart, not hurriedly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen the worst and is still standing, because you remember, and you loved, in your way, and you endured. The bell sounds once more, distant as a dream now, until there is only breath, and stillness, and rest. So, sleep now. Let the carts be still. Let the wind be soft. Let your burden fall away. You've carried enough, and the world, at last, is quiet.